Dr. Tina Seelig, welcome to the Mel Robbins podcast.
I could not be more delighted. Thank you so much for having me.
I am thrilled about the topic that we're going to talk about. I love your research and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come and share all of this research around luck and how we can use it to improve our lives. And I think that's where I want to start. So could you talk to me and the person that's here with us right now and just tell us what might change about our lives if we really apply everything you're about to teach us today?
I couldn't be more delighted to share this information, because when people understand that they have more agency in their lives, they realize that they have levers they can use every single day to make themselves luckier.
When you talk about luck, Dr. Seelig, what are you talking about? What does that mean?
First of all, please call me Tina. The definition of luck is success or failure apparently caused by chance.
Success or failure apparently caused by
exactly.
Wait, what is the apparently in there for?
And that's the point. I mean, this is really important. The word apparently, it looks on the surface as though it's chance, but really underneath, there are things that you have done to tempt good luck your way.
Oh, okay. So I want to make sure that I am tracking, and I want to make sure that as the person who's with us is listening, we got that. Because I think that there is a little treasure buried beneath that, which is oftentimes the things that we attribute to luck. Are you saying that once we understand everything you're about to teach us, that those things we once just attributed to luck, bad luck or good luck, we could trace back and say, actually, there was something that I set in motion that I'm not giving myself credit for that made this chance thing happen?
Exactly. And in fact, we often use the word luck to humbly say, oh, I didn't have anything to do with this. But if you actually unpack it, you'll see what actually happened to bring that good luck your way. Or people don't understand the things they did to make themselves luckier. And so what I've been doing is unpacking all the things that are in that apparently to show the things that people actually are doing to make themselves luckier.
Okay, so you have done all this research. You've written this massive best-selling book, What I Wish I Knew About Luck. And you also have concluded that there is a science to becoming a luckier person. What's the number one thing that drives the lucky breaks that people get?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that there is a physics to luck.
Ooh.
All of the world is cause and effect, right?
Okay. Yes.
Fortune is the things that happen to you. Luck is what you control. And it's very, very important to distinguish between those two things, because people conflate the concept of fortune and luck, and they make a mistake in thinking that everything is just happening to them. Well, of course, there are some things that are out of your control. How tall you are, where you're born, who your parents are. Those are things that are out of your control. That's, you're fortunate or you're unfortunate.
Right.
And the world is spinning and things are happening. There might be an earthquake. There might be a war.
There might be systematic racism.
Exactly.
There might be poverty. There might be all kinds of things.
Exactly. A pandemic.
Yes.
But you have more control over how you respond to it.
Okay. So I want to make sure I understand this, because I would have thought it was the opposite. Because when I hear the word lucky, I think things that happen by chance, things that happen out of the blue, things that happen to certain people that don't happen to me. But when you say there's a big difference between fortune, which to me sounds like the things that you said you don't have control over, but there's a huge group of things that are either positive things of fortune or things that feel unfortunate that are not your fault. You can't change it, but you want us to focus on creating more luck and making things go our way, which is in our control.
Absolutely.
That's a completely different version of luck than I thought.
Well, it's really important. It's critically important to distinguish between the things that happen to you and how you respond. I mean, there's this fabulous, very famous quote by Viktor Frankl about the fact that, the world is happening to you and you have this time between stimulus and response where you get to decide how to respond. And that's where luck comes in. It comes in by taking the time to think about how you actually engage with the world. We are in a constant dance with the world, where we are either leading or we're following. And there are times in which the world is leading, right? The pandemic happened and our world's all turned upside down. But then you get to decide what you're going to do with it.
I've never thought about luck this way. I have always thought about luck as just something that kind of happens to you, or, if you're unlucky, that happens to you too. And so really thinking about the fact that, yes, there are lots of things that happen that are unfair. And yes, there are very real problems. And that is true and unfortunate. And we can take the science of creating your own luck, if you will, and use it to respond in a different way.
Exactly. And I am so excited to share the things that people can do to unlock luck in their lives.
All right. I want to read to you from your best-selling book, What I Wish I Knew About Luck. This is on page 6. Luck requires taking a chance, a calculated risk. It begins the moment you decide to act in the face of uncertainty. Whether it's throwing your hat into the ring for a competitive opportunity, moving to a distant city without a clear plan, or simply introducing yourself to someone new, each action is a leap of faith beyond the familiar. These moments may seem small, but they're pivotal, creating openings to capture lucky opportunities. What does that mean?
Every decision you make opens the door to something brand new. We are always one decision away from a completely different life. I think about this all the time. Some of the closest friends I have made in my life are people who were standing next to me in line, who I started a conversation with, and we found that we had something in common. And then we started working together, and then we became best friends. If I had not started that conversation, that entire world would not have existed.
Okay, let's stop right here, because I love this kind of thing. Okay. So I was standing in a bar it wasn't a bar. I was standing at a United Way benefit in 1994. I was a brand new legal aid attorney in New York City. And I walked up to the bar and I ordered a bourbon on the rocks to go. I wanted it on a plastic cup because I was going to bounce from the party. And behind me, I heard somebody say, "That sounds great. Make it 2." I turn around. And it was Christopher Robbins, who I will be celebrating my 30th wedding anniversary with this year. Let's unpack that moment in the framework of luck versus fortune. Do you see what I mean?
Exactly. Okay. Well, I think it's a great example.
Okay.
Because he saw you, he was intrigued. He said, "I'll take the same." And you started a conversation.
Yes.
It could have been the end. Think of the number of conversations that went nowhere. "Thank you very much. I'll see you later. I'm going home."
Think about the moments where you see somebody who's interesting, but you don't walk across the room.
Exactly. And I have so many examples. Let me tell you one.
Okay.
That is, in fact, this book is the result of a conversation I had with someone sitting on an airplane next to me.
Really?
I was flying across the country, early morning flight, could have just shut my eyes and gone to sleep. The man sitting next to me was a publisher. And I started to chat with him. We talked for a good long time. And at some point, I pulled out a book proposal. I took a little risk and I said, "Guess what? I've got a book proposal right here on my computer." And he was kind enough to look at it. And, he said, "This is very nice, Tina, but not really for us." I said, "Okay, no problem." But guess what? At the end of the flight, we exchanged contact information. And he sent me a text as I was walking off the plane. I stayed in touch. I was teaching a class, my creativity class at Stanford. And I thought, gee, I'm doing a project this quarter. What should it be on? Maybe I'll do it on the future of publishing. So I called him up again and I said, "Hey, guess what? I'm doing a project on the future of publishing. Would you come to class?" He said, "Sure." So he came, he met my students. We had a great opportunity for everyone. I followed up again with some videos of some projects my students had worked on. Some were as part of a global innovation tournament. They were pretty cool. He said, "Wow, there is a book in here for the students." And he wanted to meet the students who had worked on this project. I said, "Okay, that sounds pretty cool." And I set up a lunch. And at the end of the lunch, which he had brought one of his editors to, his editor turned to me and said, "Hey, would you ever consider writing a book?" And I gave him the exact same proposal I had given his boss. I don't know, it was either 1-2 years earlier, but I kept that relationship going. That was the point. There were all these little choices I made that ended up leading to the publication of What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, starting with the conversation with the man sitting next to me on the plane.
So do you want us to think about luck really more as something you create through the actions you take?
Exactly.
Versus something that just happens to some people versus others?
Exactly. But here's the important thing, Mel.
Okay.
Luck is ubiquitous.
What does that mean?
Opportunities are ubiquitous. Opportunities are like the wind, but you need a sail to catch it. And what I am passionate about is teaching people how to catch the winds of luck.
So I would love to have you, Dr. Seelig, just speak to the reality for some people that opportunities don't feel ubiquitous, and they historically haven't been ubiquitous. If, let's say, you're being discriminated against, or you are in a situation where something through no fault of your own, you're being sexually harassed at work, or there's very serious problems that people are facing, right? And so they might hear this research, which I think could be very helpful in how you respond to things that are very real. How do you want somebody to think about the opportunities that are out there, even if you've had a lifetime of feeling like the door is always closed in your face because of the color of your skin, or because you're a woman and you haven't been paid what you know what I mean? Because I don't.
Of course. And honestly, life is not fair. I mean, people are born into very terrible circumstances. There are people who have medical problems. There are people who have dysfunctional families. But we have choices we make. I've been doing work for the last, 10 years, working with a group at San Quentin State Prison called The Last Mile. It's an amazing program where they teach innovation and entrepreneurship and coding to men and women who are incarcerated. Now, these are folks who have had very, very difficult lives, often starting with very unfortunate circumstances. And the people who are in this program are given a chance to learn these skills and to develop the mindset needed to be successful when they are released from prison. And it's remarkable to see how people can change. People can change their attitude and their actions to unlock possibilities that they didn't see before.
I think that's so important to understand. And I can tell based on the passion and the just intensity of what you're like, no, this is real. And it doesn't mean that there won't be challenges that you face in life. Those are very real, but you have a choice in whether you just throw in the towel and say, this is just how things are, or you lean in and say, okay, how I respond to this and how I think about creating my own luck. And as you said, that there's opportunities everywhere, but you've got to open the sail to catch them. Can you unpack that analogy of catching the winds of luck?
Great. Can I show you a graphic?
Please.
Okay.
So I want to describe this for the person who is listening so you don't miss a thing. Dr. Seelig is holding up a painting, and there's a hot air balloon, there is a sailboat, there is a windmill, and there is a church sitting on the shore, and the sailboat's sailing on the ocean, and the hot air balloon's over the ocean, but on the shore is the windmill and the church.
Yeah. To me, it actually looks like a house. It's a house with a wind vane on the top.
Oh, is that what that is?
That is a wind vane on
gotcha.
the top of the house. Yeah. But it could look like that at
Yes.
a distance. The idea is that the winds of luck are ubiquitous. They are always blowing. And there are different ways in which we engage with them. Some people stay inside the house and they shut the shutters and they don't even pay attention. They don't even see them. They might open the shutters and see them, but they might not even do anything. Okay, I'm just going to turn the other way. Now, there are some people who are like a wind vane. They're at the top of the house. They're noticing the opportunities. They're swiveling on their axis, but they're not doing anything with it. They're just looking. Oh, there's an opportunity there and there and there. They're not doing anything.
Oh my gosh. If you're the kind of person that has been thinking forever about applying for that job, or using social media to market yourself, or you're the kind of person that has been thinking about going back to school or thinking about getting an online dating profile, you are the weather vane spinning around in the wind doing nothing.
Exactly.
Going nowhere.
Exactly. Or you could be a hot air balloon. Now, hot air balloon, the winds of luck are taking you where they may. You don't really have much control. But you know what? There are times in our life when it's reasonable to be a hot air balloon, to be a leaf in the wind and say, I'm just going to see where my interests take me.
Yep.
So that's a reasonable thing to do. But then once you start seeing an opportunity where you go, wow, there's something here, there, you can become a windmill. And a windmill is where you are really capturing the winds of luck in that local area, and you are harnessing all the luck. So give me an example of that. Okay, you get a job somewhere.
Yes.
And you go, okay, I am going to be the best I can in this job.
Got it.
I am going to see what I can make of this. And in fact, one of the things I tell my students is you don't get a job, you get the keys to the building. You go, okay, I'm going to see where this takes me.
Oh, I love that. Hold on a second. I want to make sure that you really got what Dr. Seelig just told you, because this is something that I am sending this to all three of our adult children right now. You do not get a job. You get the keys to the building.
You bet.
And you create your own luck in that job, even if you hate the job, by showing up to that job every day and doing the things you're about to tell us to do and bringing a certain type of energy and a certain level of excellence and a certain attitude in order to capture the opportunity that is swirling around that office that you're dragging yourself into.
Exactly.
So you can choose the bad attitude or you can choose to have a different attitude. But what you're here to say is trust my research. There is opportunity everywhere for the taking if you wake up and recognize it.
Right. And you can take it further, though.
Okay.
You can become a sailboat.
And how do I do that?
The sailboat is looking for the luck. It's out there searching for the winds of luck, right? You can be capturing the luck like a windmill where they are locally, or you can be a sailboat where you're out there with a goal, a specific goal in mind, and you're saying, how do I get to those winds to get me to that destination?
Got it.
So let me put this down.
Yes.
It's kind of big. And I want to talk to you about how to become a sailboat.
Okay.
I want to talk to you about that. Because if you want to be a sailboat to capture the winds of luck, there are three things you need to do. First, you need to build that sailboat. The next is you need to recruit your crew. And third, you need to hoist the sail.
Okay.
And this is very important to separate these three things.
Okay.
You build your sailboat. That's all the internal work. You know, it's funny. Whenever I tell people I'm writing a book about luck or I'm doing work on luck, they go, oh, yes, fortune favors the prepared mind. Well, I love that quote. You know, Louis Pasteur, great quote about fortune favoring the prepared mind. But what is the prepared mind?
I don't know.
That sailboat is your prepared mind.
Okay.
That is all the internal work that you need to do to be ready to ultimately catch the winds of luck.
Okay. So let's stop right with building the sailboat. Okay. Because I know as you're listening and watching right now, you're like, all right, I'm with you, Dr. Seelig, but how do I build a sailboat? What does that actually mean? How am I doing the internal work to turn this brain of mine that's told me my entire life, oh, things like that don't happen to a person like me. Well, I'll never get out of this debt. I'm not going to be this way. I'm not smart. I'm not good. Because I can tell you right now, that doesn't sound like you're building a sailboat. So what are the specific things that we need to do or know or change in order to take advantage of step one, which is you got to build that sailboat in yourself?
Exactly. And it's very, very important.
Okay.
One is you need to know what your core values are.
Okay.
If you do not have those core values, which are like the keel under your boat that keeps you steady, you're going to be manipulated by people who ask you to do things that are not ethical. They're not legal. I mean, this is how people get caught when they don't have their core values. And in fact, I can tell you a story about what happened to me when I was young and I didn't know how to do this. I had taken my first job right out of graduate school. And it was a med tech company. And I was so eager. I was just wanted to do everything right. And the president of the company asked me to go to a conference. And it was a conference actually being hosted by a competing company. And he asked me to go not as a member of the team of this company, but as Dr. Seelig from Stanford. And he was my boss. Why should I question him?
Yeah.
I had never thought about whether this would be ethical or not. So I said, sure, of course I'll go. So I got on a plane. I went to Chicago. I registered Dr. Seelig from Stanford, went to the conference. And as the conference started, it was a relatively small conference. At the end of every session, I raised my hand and asked all sorts of probing questions because I knew a lot about this technology because I was working at a competing company.
Yeah.
And they started getting suspicious. And they called up my company and they said, is Tina Seelig there? And of course, the receptionist said, yes, no, she's not here. She's at a conference in Chicago. And so I was getting into the elevator to go up to my room and two people followed me in. The door shut and one of them turned and hit the stop button.
What did you think was happening?
I had no idea. I turned around and they looked at me. They backed me in the corner and they said, are you a spy? I mean, I burst into tears, honestly. I was like, oh my gosh. But they said, we called your company. They were very funny. They said, we understand you're the VP of marketing of the company, which was sort of a joke since I was like an intern. But they escorted me out very quickly. And I sat on the sidewalk thinking, what happened? And I realized it was because I hadn't even taken a minute to think about my values and to think about, and I was very unlucky, wasn't I? Because I should have said to my boss, of course I can't do that. I can't misrepresent myself. And so one of the first things you need to do is really think about what your core values are.
How do you figure that out? Is there like a simple way to really think about what your core values are? Because I can think about moments in my life, for example, a period of my life where when we were struggling financially as a young married couple with kids, my core value was safety and security. And so I said yes to lots of stuff I wouldn't do right now because I wanted to pay the bills. And it was aligned with my values then. My values now have shifted because I still value security and safety, but it's not on fire right now. And so I have different values, but I think it's one of those things where it's not something that people stop and think about. So how would you recommend if the person's listening right now? Because I think we all want to be luckier, and we certainly want to open up the wins and like capture as much opportunity as we can. But how do you figure out what you actually value?
So there are a lot of ways to do it.
Okay.
And a lot has to do with taking the time to actually think about it in advance.
Okay.
Think about what your values are. Are you going to misrepresent yourself? There's a slippery slope. Once you make one decision to do something that's not ethical, it's much easier to make the second decision, right? Once you've done the first one, that door is open, and you have to think about who you want to be in the world. You also can put together a personal board of advisors. This is a really helpful tool. Who are you going to go to when you're asked to do something where you have a kind of a spider sense, where you go, you know what? This doesn't smell right. Who do I go to get some feedback? And it's also really helpful to have the ability to walk away. Now it's really difficult when you're in a situation where you're feeling financially really vulnerable and you go like, I don't know what to do. But oftentimes there's a case we used to use with our students many years ago about somebody who had taken on a lot of financial debt, bought an expensive house, moved to a new city, did all sorts of things that were expensive. And then when the company he was working for started doing things that were illegal, he couldn't leave because he couldn't afford to give up the job. So think about not putting yourself in a position where you're so tied to an organization or to some situation where you can't walk away if you're asked to do something that you find is unethical.
Well, I can give another example, and let's see if this one checks out, Dr. Seelig, with the research you've done. I was talking to a friend over the weekend who's in a relationship, and this person knows that they don't want to be engaged to the person that asked them to be married. And she was going on and on and on about it because it's a very difficult decision. And she said, well, the problem is, I just really am a peacekeeper. And I said, hold on a second. That's what you were in your first marriage, which is why you were miserable. You kept the peace and you never told the truth. You, in this chapter, have made it very clear that what you value more than anything is being a truth teller. And I would imagine that if you don't understand what your core value is in terms of why you want to be even in like a romantic relationship, I want to be with somebody where I can be fully myself versus constantly suppressing what I feel and what I need in order to make somebody else happy, you will never, ever, ever build this internal sailboat, and the winds of chance are going to steer you to all kinds of relationships because you don't realize you actually value that rather than just companionship. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And that's just one piece of the puzzle is your core values. You need to know, which is sort of tied into what you just said, the story you tell about who you are in the world, right? We each have a story of who we are, and that story is always shifting depending upon who we're with and how we feel about ourselves, and the ability to own that story